Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to be discussing how the ExpandIT solution works for service organizations, and more specifically, we'll look at how ExpandIT integrates into Microsoft Dynamics D365 Business Central Service. I believe most of you are familiar with ExpandIT, but for those who don't know, ExpandIT is a Microsoft Dynamics independent software vendor, and we specialize in service management. And if I haven't met you already, my name is Julissa Gonzalez. I work on the marketing side here at ExpandIT. And I also have Taylor Roki, who is a field service product expert and business analyst, who will be speaking in just a few minutes. So just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. We are recording today's session, and everyone who registered will get an email with a link to the on-demand version within the next few days. The session will run for around 30 minutes, which does include time for Q&A. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit them to the Q&A panel on your RingCentral console, and we can address them towards the end. If for some reason we don't have enough time to address all of your questions in today's live event, please be assured that we will follow up with you directly following the webinar. And the agenda is as follows. We'll look at the objective for the webinar. Next, I'll discuss the key takeaways. Taylor will then take it over and get into the demo bit. And we did allocate some time for Q&A at the end. We'll finish off with next steps and additional resources you may use. So what is the main objective of today's webinar? The main objective of the webinar is to provide an educational session on how ExpandIT integrates to Microsoft Dynamics D365 Business Central's service module. And the areas covered will include how ExpandIT integrates with Business Central Service, benefits to using service orders and contracts in Business Central, where the consumption is recorded in Business Central, and how to create on-the-fly work orders against a service item in ExpandIT. And now I'll hand it over to Taylor to get started.
All right, so why service management in Business Central? So we usually see service management being used for short-term orders or any serviceable items. And service management in Business Central creates the ability to identify parts for a service item, such as original bill of material, which is in the service item worksheet, keep a service history of items that have been installed. It also links ownership history of the items that have been installed to make sure that the items are linked to the correct customer. And it also tracks warranty claims against the items. So what does service management allow? It allows service contracts, service orders, and service items. So it really creates the ability to set up maintenance cycles per service item. It also, for service contracts, allows the setting up of billing cycles, even warranty pricing across that contract. And then service orders allows documents to post your history against, just like a sales order. So it allows for one or more service items per order, and it also allows for tracking costs specific to a service item or across the whole order itself. And then we have service items, and they're not required to be used in service orders, but they are required in service contracts. So basically, you know, it's how do you start building the history of what has been installed and serviced. So service items can be linked to an item or components. Components are a listing of items that are related to the service item, and this is not required and can be quite a bit of setup, but it is definitely an option in creating a listing of what makes up that service item. So service contracts, it allows for contracts. It's important as it creates the ability to set up maintenance cycles per service item, setting up those billing cycles, setting up warranty pricing across the contracts. It also requires it to be linked to that service item, as we had mentioned. It's allowing a customer to set up a schedule of service, which includes multiple different service items over different periods, but on the same exact contract itself. So for example, this might be, let's say, an air compressor, where we service the motor twice a year, but we inspect the tank once a year. In this case, we could set up the service order to be having multiple inspections across that time frame. So the customer has the ability to set different revenue periods of the contract as well. So for example, the contract could be billed yearly, monthly, bi-weekly, weekly, however it pans out, it can all be set up that way. It also allows customers to report actual costs and revenue per contract to determine profitability. It does have an automatic generation of service orders based off of the contract details, and that's what ExpandIT links to is service orders. So what the contracts though may, they may be, they're not required, and they may have some disadvantages for a business, but in reality, they do help you maintain and manage the actual contract itself, which then does create those service orders for you to look at it more in depth and at detail. So next we have the service orders, which is what ExpandIT integrates with. So now if you are using service contracts, that system will create the service order, which is how it gets planned in our system. So service orders allows a customer to create an order to capture what needs to be serviced and what was serviced. The service orders are just like sales orders, for example, but with an extra level of detail. So they do have lines which are found on the service item worksheet. So very similar to the planning lines found on a job. With service orders, you can have one or more service items on the order itself. Each of those items can have its own service item worksheet. Another capability of the service order is that it has the fault and reason codes. And as we all definitely know, companies do like to track the errors and the reason behind those errors to make better business decisions in the future, or even to adjust forecasts and costing and much more. So we've seen a lot of larger companies, companies working with the government, really benefiting from those fault and reason codes. So now on to the service items. So they are, again, not required for service orders, but if you are wanting to use Business Central for the historical tracking, it is definitely suggested to use them. So they do have the advantage of defining what needs to be serviced and are linked to the service item worksheet, which has the details behind what makes up that service item. So service items do allow a customer to track historical information against a single item. It allows them to track the components in a service item as well, such as other service items, specific other inventoried and non-inventoried items that make up the end item. So an example of this, again, back to the air compressor, which has a tank and a motor, you may offer a different warranty on the tank than the motor. So you may offer the service of the motor and you can switch that out possibly. In fact, the motor itself may be also a service item that you bought from a sales order, and you may have a warranty for a third-party vendor that you need to track internally. So with the service items, you're able to look at all of these pieces that make up the air compressor. So service items also allows you to track the owning customer and the current location or ship to of an item. The warranties start and end dates for an item, which includes the ability to create a percentage you may charge or credit in that time frame. And it also allows for troubleshooting guides. There's something called skills within service items as well, which allows the customer to specify a skill set required for a service item, which can then be matched to a resource for planning purposes to make sure that the right person and equipment is set out for the jobs. So it also allows you to have the detailed lines in the service item worksheet for the customer to define the different items, inventoried and non-inventoried, that may be used on the job site. You can also add resource lines to define the hours expected to be out on the site. So with these detailed lines, like planning lines on the job, you are building the budget of the service request. So the resource hours are not required, because with ExpandIT, we have automatic timers, which will collect the actual hours spent on the job site. But the estimate can always be added to the service item worksheet. When the materials are consumed in the field, we display the service item worksheet as planned lines, but the technician will always enter what actually was used quantity-wise and can always add additional materials, maybe from truck inventory stock, that were also used to complete the service request. When the service request is complete, the actual consumed time and material is sent back internally in ExpandIT and can be reviewed and approved to send to Business Central to consume to the service order. Within ExpandIT, we also have auto approvals. So if you want the material items to automatically be consumed to the order, that can be set to auto approve, but time can always be reviewed, edited, and approved internally in ExpandIT and then sent back to Business Central. So Business Central, ExpandIT workflow. So basically you have a service order that's created. Then you can add your service items. Again, not required. Service item worksheet can be filled out with the expected items. Again, not required. The service order is then, all that data is pulled from Business Central into ExpandIT. Then the service order is planned in ExpandIT. The field consumes the time and materials, and then the time and material is approved. And at that point, the data is sent back into Business Central, and then time and material is consumed to the Business Central service order. So that's kind of the overall workflow, and we'll kind of go deeper into detail for that. So ExpandIT is able to pull data from Business Central environment through an extraction of data, which can be run multiple times per day. And although the extraction of data that is being pulled is all the new and modified records to display in the ExpandIT planning board for planning purposes. So this allows the dispatcher to know what new work is needing to be addressed. So if the service order is created in Business Central, we are pulling it into our system with no duplication of work. So all needed information for planning is automatically pulled when the extraction process runs. While pulling the service order, we are also pulling in service items and the service item worksheet details if they are entered. This again is displayed on what we call the work order in ExpandIT. Now that we have all information needed for planning, the dispatcher is able to quickly drag and drop the service order onto the planning board. Within ExpandIT, it is creating a work order. A work order is what holds all of the details from Business Central and will have planned visits against it. By doing the drag and drop feature, it will actually automatically create the planning entry on the work order to the resource at the date and time that it was dropped on. So from here, if you have seen our presentations, you are able to add a coworker, meaning any resource, a person, heavy equipment, trucks, anything that is needed to be scheduled to get the job done is able to be linked together. And then once the work order has been planned and is in a status of appointed or accepted, it is visible to the mobile device of the resources or resource assigned. If they have reception, they'll be able to see it. So within the work order, all of the details from the service order are visible and able to be edited. The service item from Business Central goes to the task tab. The service item worksheet from Business Central is now on the lines tab under the planned lines. From here, additional material or resource lines can be added to get the correct information to the field technician. So all of those details that were pulled from Business Central are on the work order, which is now visible to the mobile user. And that is without having to re-enter or double enter anything. The new information added because it was maybe not in Business Central is all that was manually done. So if the service order is set up with all of the service items and service item worksheet details, the only thing that you would have to manually enter from ExpandIT would be the planning entry. And that would be also known as scheduling. Now that the service technician sees the work order, they can view all work details, start the visit to begin tracking time, and we can break out travel time and work time based on the work types within Business Central. So the detailed consumed time can be evaluated. It is also good to know if you are traveling to a job site longer than you are servicing, especially if the budget does not include drive time. So the technician, once the visit is started, can begin entering materials used, filling out any forms, attaching pictures, and much more. Once all of the time and material is collected at the end of each visit, which could be 1 or more days, the data is sent internally within ExpandIT for an administrator to review the time and material and approve to send back to Business Central. As we did mention, we do have the ability to automatically approve time and or materials. Next, when the approved time, material, orders, and statuses are all complete, the data is sent back into Business Central into our ExpandIT tables, which can then be viewed, edited, or resolved if there are any errors. And then the records are converted to be consumed to the service order. So that data, the actual time and material, is sent to the service lines page at the service item level. So one thing to mention, natively within Business Central, if time and material is being consumed within ExpandIT and being tracked for that service order, it needs somewhere to go. So we do not require service items. However, Business Central does require a line to be on the service order. So you can basically just go into your service order, go to and type in on one of the lines a description. And then at that point, all of the consumed data will be sent to that one line, which in a sense is not a service item, but it is a line on your service order. So now that the data is on the service lines page, this is where you can determine what needs to be shipped, invoiced, and consumed. And basically, that is the entire whole circle of how we at ExpandIT pull data from Business Central, bring it into our system, collect all of the actual data of what time and material was spent out on the site, and then we send it back in after it's been approved to Business Central so that the invoice can be generated, the time and materials can be consumed, and it goes just into one full circle. And it makes it feel like a very seamless process with the two systems being linked together. So another cool feature we have in ExpandIT is that we can actually create on-the-fly service orders from within the planning board or the mobile device. This allows the dispatcher, if an emergency request is filed, they can create everything from one system and not need to go back into Central to create it. So we do want to be clear though, this is the basic creation of a service order. So if there are templates being used or a customization in Business Central, that is not applied here within ExpandIT. This is the bare bones of a service order to make sure that the technician can receive the information needed to get the service done. All information will need to be entered into ExpandIT manually. So I'm going to actually show you how this all works within our system. All right, so basically from the planning board, you will click create new work order up here. And at that point, it will pull up a screen and it's going to show you the customers that you have. So you can type in a portion of a customer name, or you can click the search button and it will pull up the whole list. So if I typed in a portion of mine, I'm going to go ahead and use my Omni Resorts properties. I can select that customer and you'll see that it populates up here. Now the next thing for if you're using service items is you'll want to go over to the service item tab. What that's going to do is it actually shrinks down your service item list to only the service items related to this customer. So it makes it very easy for you to understand which service items are needing to be serviced. So I can select my specific service item. It's going to ask me for a work description up here. So I could put, Omni Chiller A repair room 556 or 56. Let's put that. Then after that, I'm going to click proceed with selected. And that's what is now going to create our work order. So our work order, it's pulling in all of the details that it possibly can bring in from based off of the customer and the service item itself. So you can always update your work description here. You can add in the department, you can add in your work type, you can add in a PO if needed, ordered by, all of this information that gets sent back over to Business Central. Here's your customer, all your customer information, the work address. If you had a different ship to, you can search that ship to right here. For the task is where the service item went. You can always add additional tasks or service items here as well. From the lines, this is where you have your planned lines. So I can select that I want to put a product on that task of chiller A. I can type in a portion of a product, select my inventory location I want it deducted from, enter in my quantity that I expect to use, and click add line. So now I've added this planned line. Again, in the field, they will consume the actual amount of the items that were used. That would come up to the consumed lines. At that point, I would want to come over here, add my planning entry. So I can type in that it's going to go for myself. I want to work there for possibly 5 hours. Click add, it will add it onto our planning board when we click save and close. And I can also add in any type of attachment as well. So I can, add, let's say, a document, could drag and drop that over here, click save and close, and it will actually add this onto our planning board now. If I scroll over, and it will be ready for it to be worked on. So immediately that is available for myself out on my mobile device. So now if we do come over into our mobile, we can again do the same thing where we can create a service order from the field. So from the main menu, you'll click create new work order, and the same type of thing where you're going to be able to select your customer. So we can use our same one that we just used. Select my customer. It's going to pull up what ship to. I can select my default, let's say, and now it's going to show me all of my service items available. I can choose my service item, my task. This is what goes to your task. So we can leave that alone, click next, add in my work description. Again, I can put chiller B room 75 repair. Enter my information, fill in my order type. I can plan it to myself. I can plan it to somebody else, to a pool, whatever the case may be. I can enter in how long I expect to be out there. I can enter any of this information again, click next. This is just a summary. As you noticed, I did not have to enter any items that are going to be used. And that's because on the actual visit, when they started, that's where they would just enter all of that information directly. You wouldn't need to mark what is planning to be used. So I can then click done, and I've created these two work orders or service orders that do not exist in Business Central currently. So once the time and material is actually consumed and approved, at that point, it is when it will be sent back in to Business Central. So we do want to highlight that it's not when you create the work order or service order, it will not go directly back into Business Central until the consumption is ready to be sent over. So I am going to hand it back over to Jaleesa, and thank you for joining me.
Perfect, thank you, Taylor. So we do have some questions from the audience. And the first one is, ExpandIT pulls service orders from Business Central. can a work order created in ExpandIT be pushed back to Business Central?
Yes, so definitely, again, it will not be sent back though into Business Central until there is time or material consumed to that specific order that was created. At that time, when it's sent back, it will generate the service order. You can use either a specified numbering series, or you can utilize an ExpandIT work order number to send that back into Business Central, so you'll know which orders were created from within Business Central and from within ExpandIT.
Perfect. So the next question we have is, if you allocate a technician to a service order in Business Central, does ExpandIT pull that allocation into the worksheet?
It does. So with service orders, we do have auto planning. So from the service item worksheet, and the service item itself, if you fill out all of the needed information, and as we go through an implementation with each customer and partner, we do explain which fields are needed for auto planning. If you fill all of that out at the extraction of data, all of those new records, any modified records, we would grab it and go ahead and plan to the specific date and time, as well as to the resource or resources that have been added to the service item worksheet.
Perfect. The next one we have is, how often is the ExpandIT database refreshed for new customers and new service items?
So every time that the extraction of data is run, so how many ever times you want throughout the day, every time it is pulling any modified or new records, including customers, service items, resources, users, departments, any of that information in conjunction with the service orders, right? All of that is being pulled in at each extraction.
Thank you. And then a couple of more. So does ExpandIT add any features to support a physical stock count of a technician's vehicles, or is the core Business Central physical stock count used?
So we actually do not link up with inventory. We do not show inventory levels within ExpandIT. The reason being is that when the technician is out in the field, if he's saying he used something, he must have had it in his truck or wherever he had it. And in reality, that still has to be handled over within Business Central to be taken care of. So regardless, if we showed the inventory levels, we don't want the field to be stopped and have to call in and say, well, I have this one item, I need to use it, or just not even enter it into the system. And now your costing is not going to be accurate. So we are displaying the items, the actual item cards that are within an inventory location, but we are not displaying the quantity there. So when you're consuming lines, you can filter down to certain item locations, go ahead and enter in any information, search any of it, and then send that back in. So if there was any issues with when it needs to be consumed, if there's no inventory level, that would all have to be done on the Business Central side.
Perfect. So we have one more question relating back to inventory. So does it show inventory from a master list or just from a technician's assigned vehicle or location?
So through our ExpandIT setup, you can actually assign a inventory location only to a technician or mobile user, or you can give them the ability to see all locations. So it's really a configuration item per customer that we set up with you guys.
Great, thank you. Those were all the questions. And again, if anybody does have any questions, feel free to email me and we can get back to you. And so there are a few additional resources that are available for your use. As mentioned, we will distribute the recording afterwards, so you will be able to go over the training again and use it as you may like. We do have a part 2 to this webinar series where we'll look at how ExpandIT integrates to Business Central jobs. And there are other educational videos on our official YouTube page. Lastly, if you are a customer and you need support, you can always contact support@expandit.com. And with that being said, if you do have additional questions about the material that was covered, feel free to contact me. And thank you everyone for attending and have a great day.